We got more bounce in California than all y'all combined. We got more bounce in California. We like to party all the time.
Hey, welcome back to my channel. This is Michael and this is my friend Cameron, and we have a very important election coming up on Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Now we're a couple of Californians, and we're going to be voting, and so we just wanted to have a conversation.
Don't hold that against us.
About voting, and we're not going to go like really deep in the weeds on specific bills. I'm going to post some info under the definition of this video, the description of the video, for links that I think are pertinent to what we're going to be discussing that will take you step by step through some of the things that you're going to be seeing on your ballot. One of the things that I guess comes to my mind when I think about all of the quotes and the history of our founding fathers and what they built here, it kind of makes me think about something. If I can just do like a dad confession here, and that is when my little girl turned 2, I got a backyard play set. Spent all night, literally all night, putting this thing together. And put it together. She came in, it was perfect. It was her birthday. She came in and she loved it. I've neglected that thing. I've neglected the care and maintenance of that thing for like 4 solid years now. And like one of the shingles like completely fell off, the slide is cracked, it's kind of sad. And I'm in this place now with this play set where I've got a big decision to make about it. Like, am I going to keep it? Am I going to trash it? I know that fixing it is now going to take, because I've neglected it for so long, I'm not going to be able to go out there and just, like an hour or 2 hours and fix all the things that are now wrong with it.
But if you would have maintained it.
If I would have maintained it, this would be a different conversation. And the reason I'm thinking about that is that maybe you're out there and you too, just like the two of us, you love American history. You love to read about the American Revolution and the concepts and philosophies behind what is the greatest nation, not just on the face of the planet, but in the history of nations. America stands alone and so unique in so many ways. And when you do look at all those things and you look at what we've got today, maybe you kind of feel like I do with that playset. Like, dude, this is so much work now. We are so far away from what was intended at this point that maybe you just feel like, throwing your hands up and saying, well, I'm not going to vote because I don't like anybody. I don't like what they stand for. No, we're so far away from what was intended, it's not worth it anymore. Well, I'm here I guess both of us are here to talk to you and to say, no, pick up the tools, which in this case on Tuesday is your vote.
Absolutely.
Pick up the tools, get out into the backyard and go start working and tinkering on the thing, because it's not going to get better by itself. It's only going to get better when you and I pick up the tools that the founders gave to us and go back and start attacking the problems. We may not fix them overnight. We may not fix them in one, midterm election or one big election, but we've got to start the process of getting things back to where they need to be. I guess is how I wanted to start this whole conversation about
keep
Tuesday.
in mind, a politician, they worry about the next election. But a patriot, which I consider us to be, which we were just at Front Sight in Nevada, which was just
so amazing.
An amazing time. Open carry, shooting guns, learned the Second Amendment with Rick Green. And he made a great distinction that a patriot worries about the future generations to come, where a politician only worries about the next election. And we want you to be that patriot, that think about the next generation to come, your kids, your grandkids.
That's right.
And the kids that come after them. That, you know what, we don't want to give them a nation that doesn't have the enduring freedom that we've enjoyed. Yeah. And we don't want them coming back to us saying, why didn't you preserve what you had for us? Right. And so you're right, we have an important midterm election coming up, and we have 2 basic questions that we need to answer. And first one is, how do I vote? Yeah. And not really, who do I vote for, but how should I vote?
Yeah.
And in our first segment that we talked about with Rick Green, we established that absolutely you have a duty, a civic duty to America, and even as a Christian, to even put that more on top, you have a civic duty to vote.
That's right.
That, you know what, in order to keep this enduring freedom of the rights of liberty, of religion, of speech, of search and warrant, of voting, you have to vote. And you made a great phrase. It was General Pericles, was it? That.
Oh, we're talking about the last video where he said, listen, just because you're not interested in politics doesn't mean politics is not going to take an interest in you.
That's so good.
It's coming. It's coming to find you. It's totally interested in all the details of your life. And in fact, in the time in which we live, it's so much more true.
Absolutely.
Because of the technology that we have. You know, just the fact that we're online talking to you, in the age that we have, information about who you are is being gathered, whether you realize it or not, and being collected and analyzed and sold to, you know, corporations, and you know that politicians and all these things are very much interested in the decisions that you make, because in America they derive their power from the individual, the consent of the governed.
Absolutely.
So when you give your consent, and they now have hold of it, they're very interested in that, and they're not going to let it go willingly.
But that consent is important, because that consent means that you have a responsibility to choose someone who is willing to act accordingly to values and principles that we have of the Constitution.
Right.
So there's that saying, actually before I even get into that, how many times have you heard people complain about the media, the fake news, that they no longer care about the truth, but they just want to be the first ones out there and to get the report out, but they don't no longer care about the truth. And we complain about that, but that's because we have people in media that don't have the values and the morals that they should have.
Yeah.
And yet we look at Congress and we see the same thing. We complain about all the policies and the rules and the laws and the big, the get-rich scheme right away, and yet same thing applies to media. It's because we don't have people with good values in that place.
It's important.
And we could say that in everything. Government, education,
Sure.
law, medical, business, corporations. We can say that anywhere we want.
Yeah.
But yet there's that saying, it's the person behind the wheel that determines the character of that car.
Right. It all comes down to belief and character. These are all the things that drive people's decisions. John Jay, who was the first Supreme Court Justice, I'm going to slaughter this quote, so brace yourself. He said something to the effect of, Providence has provided us the right to select our rulers. So it becomes our privilege, our responsibility, and our interest to select and prefer Christians for our leaders.
Absolutely. And why?
Yeah.
Why do we select Christians to be our rulers?
Because of that thing that you're bringing out right there, and that is that component of character and belief,
of godly principles.
Right. All of us are flawed individuals. It is the message of the gospel that brings transformation to the individual and provides that internal check to all the tendencies and flaws and sins and failures and things that go on in the course of a normal human life. And the gospel provides a transformative power within. Without that, that understanding of how the gospel meshes, and Christianity specifically meshes with the formation of this country. There's another quote that's coming to my mind, and that is, maybe you can help me remember who said this. Our Constitution was only made for a religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the governance of any other.
Moral and religious.
Moral and religious people. And trying to govern, again, this is my own paraphrase of the quote, trying to use the Constitution to govern an immoral or irreligious people would be like trying to hold a whale with a net. It would just break. In other words, there's a tension between freedom and surrender to the gospel, surrender to the message of who Jesus is. There's that tension. And the more we want to move away as a society and as individuals away from Christianity, away from the message and the truths of who Jesus is, that was one of the war cries of the revolution. We will have no king but Jesus, right?
Well, they established that because they realized that inalienable rights only come from God. That if God gives us these rights, no man or government could take it away.
Right.
Because if I give you rights, I give my son rights all the time, but I can easily take them away.
Sure.
If I'm disappointed, or if I'm just having a bad day,
Yeah.
or just to be funny, whatever it may be, but I could take his rights away just like that.
Right.
But our founding fathers, once again, they understood this.
Yeah.
That if your rights come from God, government can never take them away. And that's why I think our founding fathers was so big on having the Gospels being the foundations of setting the Constitution and the path forward for America.
So many of the founders were personally invested and involved in Bible societies and in publishing,
reverends,
and in publishing and distributing Bibles to this country in its early formative years. There's something that you said too that stuck out to me, and that is the role of the press in a free society. That transparency and that tendency of those in power to sort of disguise and cloak and hide what's going on, that's the role of the press. The role of the press is to shine the light of truth and reveal and make sure that transparency in our society is happening, that conversation is happening, that the people who hold the power are aware of what's going on, so that we can make educated decisions when we do go into the polls. Never before, though, in the history of our nation, have we seen a time in which all the media that we consume, when you're in your car listening to the radio, when you're watching sports on TV, when you are going to the movie theater, when every form of media that you are now consuming is now owned by a very small handful of corporations. That's never been true before in our country. And I think that innately, whether people realize it on a conscious level or not, a lot of Americans innately feel that something is wrong in our media, because somehow we've begun to understand that it's the same thing, just dressed up in different packages, and we're not getting truth. We're not getting the hard work that the press is responsible to do, and so we're not getting the truth. And I think one other thing that we as Californians have an imperative in our state. I'd like to just, if I can, dive right into a few real key issues that we are facing as Californians. If you're watching this video, and like us, you live in California, then you can either name individuals or companies that you personally know that have moved out of the state in the last few years. There has been
thousands.
Yeah, there has been a massive exodus out of the state. I'm going to put a link, again, something else in the description below. And one of the issues that we have in this state is that we are the most highly taxed Americans in the entire union. So we're overtaxed, and we're the most highly regulated in terms of everything that has to do with just living in the state. I mean, business and every level.
Income tax.
Everything. There's so much regulation that it
permits, trying to build a home.
Everything. It is crushing business. And this is the reason why Hershey's has left. Crave, which is a company out in Sonora, or was in Sonora, they do the beef jerky, whatever, they're gone. So many other companies have packed up and left this state, as well as individuals, to find another more business-friendly environment to live in. They're voting with their feet. They're just leaving. This is a problem. And look, regardless of, however you identify yourself politically, the fact is, if we continue to reward the status quo politics in Sacramento with our vote, if we continue to just keep giving the same old people our vote, then we're just going to continue to bleed out economically as a state. I hear some people say, "Oh well, California, we've got the biggest budget. We're so rich and wealthy." But we've also got unfunded and unsustainable pensions in the state, and it's a bubble that's going to pop. We have got to put people in office that understand how business works, that understand how capitalism is supposed to work, and can implement good, healthy, business-friendly environment for the state of California. There is no reason why all the industries should be leaving. I mean,
Absolutely.
You think of California, and what's the thing that most people who don't live in California think of in California? They think of what? TV and movies, right? The entertainment industry down in Hollywood, down in Southern California. But what do you see happening in Atlanta? Atlanta is taking all the film business right out of the state. I mean, you've got major hit blockbuster movies, big TV shows, all that stuff being filmed out in Atlanta. Why? Same reason. Because at the end of the day, all these things are businesses, and people want to make money. And they can't do it
with the taxation
in this state in the way that they can in other states. We've got to just, this is not rocket science. This is very basic stuff. And this is one of the big issues that we face. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Absolutely. For me, I'm definitely going to vote on politicians or patriots, however you want to call it, on God-fearing politicians, if I can. Because if I have two candidates that don't fear God, then I just have to choose the lesser of two evils, so to speak, and just make the best decision. But once again, this isn't the end. There's other times that we're going to have elections and we can get other people involved and support. But I'm going to choose people that have a God-fearing character. And I'll be honest, I'm going to do principles that, once again, focus on righteousness. And you're a pastor, a nation, or what's that saying about righteousness? A nation exalts itself, or
sin is a reproach to any people. It says a righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. So if we nationally, if we want to see, America be great, if we want to see the greatness of America, right? A key component of that is integrity, righteousness, character. All these things that we as individuals contribute to the process.
Like the first thing I'm going to look at, I'll be honest, is I'm going to be looking at abortion.
Totally.
Once again, if we want the blessing of God, we do have to line up with His righteousness.
Right.
So, and I think these are key factors in choosing your politician. So abortion, if you are pro-choice, I'll be honest, you're not going to have my vote at all, because there's nothing in there that is righteous about taking a unborn child. I don't care if you feel that at 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks is okay. It's not. And you don't have the right to determine that. God does. And then I'm going to be looking at marriage. How do you view marriage? Is it between a man and a woman? Or is it between man and man, woman and women? Of course, I want to be for marriage between a man and a woman as Christ has set up.
Right.
Once again, these are godly principles that if we follow in this direction, we will be blessed as a nation, and things can turn around for the good and the better.
Absolutely.
And also, I'll be looking at the Second Amendment.
Totally. Listen, on this topic, Cameron and I are very fortunate because we know people who live in other parts of the state of California who simply cannot get a concealed carry permit in the state because of the county in which they live. Because, and I hope if you find yourself living in one of these counties in the state where they've got some kind of a quota, they're not going to issue you. They have basically put a de facto ban on your civil right. If you are a law-abiding citizen, it's a civil right for you to own and carry a firearm.
And the Founding Fathers even stated that every person should have the right to carry, so to protect them from invasions, intruders, murderers, rapists, but more importantly, to protect the Constitution.
That's right. So I hope that you will, if you find yourself in one of these counties, get together with some people, see if you can find someone who will help you file a lawsuit in that county, just like we saw out in Hawaii. I don't know if you've been following this issue, but there's, God bless this guy in Hawaii who was
and the Ninth Circuit,
and
which we normally call the Ninth Circus. I've been in a lot of courtrooms, and we've been at the Capitol talking in front of committees, and the Ninth Circuit is the one place I do not ever want to go because the rulings are so hideous, and they don't follow any statute of law but their own opinion. So this blew me away that the Ninth Circuit even agreed with this gentleman in Hawaii who said he has a right to conceal or have a weapon. And so
they basically made a ruling that open carry is constitutional, because you cannot de facto ban the Second Amendment. This is happening in certain areas in our state, and I would love to see this brought into court as a civil rights issue. Look, when Rosa Parks got on the front row of that bus, nobody said to her, well, yeah, you could sit on the front row of the bus as long as you have the proper permits and only on Tuesdays. And by the way, in 2 years, we're removing the front row of the bus for your safety. No, she just had a right to do it. And you have a right as an American to own and carry a firearm for your protection, for the protection of the state and of the nation and of the Constitution. This is something that you have that no one can take from you. In fact, it is the only amendment that is included in the phrasing of it, shall not be infringed, right?
Which also states the rights
of the people.
Of the people.
Of the people, right?
Of the people, not right of the government,
right.
Not right of, the state, but no, right of the people.
And so we find ourselves in a very fortunate place in the area in California in which we live to have sheriffs, local sheriffs, who understand these concepts, who abide by, embrace, and love these concepts, and so we don't face some of the issues that friends that we have even within the same state do. But if you find yourself in one of these areas, I just want to encourage you to get out. Your local elections do matter, and this is one of the reasons why. There was something that you brought up earlier, and I wanted to jump in on it too. You brought up the issue, one of them was abortion. And I made there's another video on this channel that I made because I found this article where a federal agency had basically purchased the rights to take fresh human, fetal tissue, babies that had just been aborted, to harvest those organs and to implant certain parts of them into mice so that they could create in these, basically now it's not really a mouse, it's not a human being, it's something in between.
A hybrid.
It's a hybrid, it's a chimera, it's a mouse with a human system. What the system that fights disease is the immune system. Thank you. I'm losing my nouns. It's late. Is the immune? It's a mouse with a human immune system, so that they can now do drug testing and experiment with a human immune system without having to jump through all the hoops of actually doing it on people. This is the very definition of bad science, of mad science. Absolutely. This is everything that H.G. Wells warned us about in his work of fiction. And it's not fiction anymore. It's happening in the day in which we live. This issue is enormous in this country, and we've seen, since Roe v. Wade was passed, we've seen somewhere along the lines of 60 million Americans snuffed out before they were born, in the name of convenience. Look, run the numbers. The vast majority of babies who are being aborted in this country are being aborted in the name of convenience.
Absolutely.
Not for any other reason.
And they don't take on the responsibility.
Right. And so what we've created in the society now is a tremendous vacuum. Imagine if someone could just run the stats on the finances of 60 million taxpayers that are no longer paying taxes into the system. 60 million people in the labor force who are no longer there. It's just a vast hole.
It shouldn't be that I'm pro-life, and so is Pastor Michael here. We're pro-life. It should be that our taxes go to something that we don't believe in.
Right.
Especially something that we feel is murder, in essence. I mean, think about it in law enforcement. If you kill a mother that's pregnant, guess what that's called? A double homicide.
Right.
But yet we won't clarify that when it's a mother who chooses to abort her own baby.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. But continue what you're saying.
Oh yeah. So we were having a conversation about this a couple of nights ago on this very issue, and I was talking about how every Christmas we sit down with our families and we watch a Christmas movie called "It's a Wonderful Life," right, with Jimmy Stewart, right? We love that movie. It's a classic. It's something that we watch every year. And the gist of the story of the movie is, right, this guy hits a financial crisis. He goes to the bridge, you remember, and then Clarence the angel shows up. And he's like, I wish I was never born. And Clarence is like, poof, you got your wish.
It's gonna happen.
And a whole chunk of the movie now is about Jimmy Stewart walking through his hometown, but it's a very different place. It's a very dark and different place now because he was never born. He's seeing his world without him in it. Right. And so you track through the whole movie, and then it dawns on him that his life is valuable, intrinsically valuable, not the money, right? And there's this beautiful, happy ending. The town comes together, his family's there, they're crying, everyone's coming together to kind of pull him out of his hard spot, and he realizes at the end of the film the value of a human life. It's a wonderful life, right? And Planned Parenthood is selling the opposite message. That human life is not intrinsically valuable. That what's more important is, money or career or education or convenience or any number of things.
And we shouldn't be caught up in what Planned Parenthood does on the good side. They do provide a lot of free services for women and counseling and other good factors, but that shouldn't negate the fact that they're also committing or breaking the rules and the law, so to speak, of killing unborn babies. You shouldn't be like, well, this part's okay, but that's why I support them even though they're doing wrong. It shouldn't be that way at all.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of videos come out through the Veritas. Some of those videos that came out about some of the things that were going on in the higher-ups within that organization. Look, it goes all the way back to Margaret Sanger, who wanted to use eugenics to sort of weed out the undesirables in society, who frankly was a racist. And we've got a huge issue with that in our society. This is one of the issues that we think about when we go into the voting booth. When we think about people who get up on a platform and say, I want your vote, give me power, these are the kind of things that we think about. We mentioned business, we mentioned life, and the Second Amendment. These are tremendously important, foundational sort of things that have to do with our civil rights, with the value of life, with freedom, and with economy, with business. Of course, in our state, look, Cameron and I, last year, had to evacuate our towns because of what was going on in Oroville, right?
Hey, we've actually made it on the map now. This is exciting. And
that's right. People know where Oroville is because they were watching the dam crumble before their eyes on television. And Cameron, had to leave. Of course, he's got an exciting story about that. I had to leave, pack up my family, and we, had our little adventure out on the road trying to get out of town. What we're looking at in this state is we've had 4 decades in this state with 0 federally funded or state funded water projects. In terms of retention or distribution of water, zip. Nothing for 40 years. Literally, the stuff is crumbling. Like, you know what? We prayed for rain. Like, we had all these years of drought, and we're like, oh God, send us the rain. Please send us rain. And what does he do? He dumps all the rain on us, and the dam breaks apart, right?
Yeah.
We're not ready for it.
Absolutely.
Because the leadership in this state, instead of, look, water is the lifeblood of California.
And we're a huge component in California of agriculture.
Yeah, you could, I mean, the tech industry is definitely an economic force within the state. But guess what? If they don't have any water to bathe, drink, or anything with, they're not going to do anything here either. Water is the life of the state, and this state makes a lot of food, not just for the country, but for the world.
Absolutely.
Okay? And we've got to get leadership in office that understands this basic concept, that we should be investing monies in upgrading and building new and improved ways to hold the water that we get, to distribute it in the state in the way that it needs to go. There is no reason why 4 decades should go by and nothing gets done. Instead, billions have been spent on this high-speed rail pet projects that have not manifested, and that I have personally spoken with someone who was working on an aspect of this project, who was telling me about the tremendous waste that has been going on in that high-speed rail project, because they had poorly planned the path for the project. They had to spend millions on relocating a farmer, like just to get him out of the way, because they didn't know he was in the way. That they would buy up all this land, and then they would now have, because of the path and the way it was laid out, have patches of land that were unusable, that now the state has to spend more money to buy up because nobody can use it now anymore. I mean, it just goes on and on and on with the kind of waste that we see with just bad decision making and sort of feel-good projects and things like this, that the money gets diverted into instead of things that are foundational to the life of the state. And we've got 2 options in this state in terms of governor. We're talking about statewide stuff.
Absolutely.
We've got John Cox and we've got
Gavin Newsom.
And Gavin Newsom, we have something where we have a baseline for him, because we've seen him in his political career for some time now. We've seen
he was a mayor in San Francisco.
That's right.
And so you can get a good political basis of what he does business-wise, financially-wise, economically-wise. And I'll be honest, if you look at San Francisco and say, this is a great city, then he's your man. But if you want to walk around all the poop and...
There's an app for that.
There is an app for that, to go around that. And even when we were in San Francisco, I was there for an interview for a job that's not in San Francisco, but outside the state. And you know, my son, he's only about maybe 3 years old, ended up picking up a hypodermic needle exposed on the street, and it was just laying everywhere. And so once again, you have a general basis, a foundation of who he is, what he stands for, and that's not something that I want in my state.
Right.
And with that, I'll be honest, the homelessness, that's in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, and in the entire state,
Yeah.
because
I think we're one of the highest of all the states.
1 out of every 4 homeless people in the entire continental United States is in California.
And why do you think that is? I'll tell you why. Bad leadership. Absolutely bad leadership. And plus, once again, we're not holding accountable the people of taking ownership of, you know what the Bible says, if a man does not work, he should not eat.
Yep. That's right.
Once again, these are these godly principles that we need to instill in our politicians and our vote for.
That's right.
And that, you know what, we have John Cox, who I think has great ideas for the business and for agriculture. Like I said, water is the lifeblood of California.
That's right.
And like I said, we probably hold, 60% of the agriculture here, even for other states, and aiding them. and what they need.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we have I think it's an easy decision for me, personally.
I think it should be an easy decision for every Californian, because now we can look at a broad scope of decision making out of basically what in Sacramento has been a one-party system, right? One party that has dominated politics in the state, and we can see the kinds of decision making that have come out of that one entity that has dominated politics in Sacramento. It's pretty easy to see if you're an entrepreneur or a business person or someone who cares about the issues of water and food production and all the things that sort of make the state the Golden State. This is a great state. It's beautiful.
The weather is beautiful here.
But the leadership has been making terrible decisions. They do not deserve to be rewarded with power when they continue to show over and over again that they will abuse and misuse that power that they are given. I think it's time for someone new to have a seat in that governor's office.
And to go off of that, I'm going to encourage Christians. I think actually I blame a lot of fault on Christians. We are held to a higher standard to make sure we put in people of good moral values, God-fearing people, to uphold the Constitution but care about the needs of others before themselves. And so I do blame a lot of this on Christians. We've gotten lazy and relaxed and said, you know what, we'll just let God take care of this, or
we'll let government do it.
Yeah, we'll let government do it, and we see the byproduct of what's happening now. And so I'm encouraging every Christian out there in the state of California, it's time for us to stand and do what is right and put in people of godly character, moral values.
That's right.
I want to remind the Christian people that once again, we don't fight against flesh and bone. We don't fight against the person.
Right.
I believe Scripture says that we fight against dark places, spiritual beings in higher places.
Yeah.
And that we fight against evil. That's really what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that when you step out and you vote in a godly way, in moral principles, in a God-fearing way, guess what? You're fighting against evil that is in spiritual high places.
That's right.
And that's what we're fighting.
Yeah.
So you're not fighting the person, and we want to pray for them. If you are a Christian, we should pray for our politics. I believe
Absolutely.
in 2 Timothy, is it 1 Timothy or 2 Timothy? It says that we are first to pray for the people that are in need of healing or sickness. But it says after that, it says pray for those that are in authority.
That's right. I want to say this to those of you who are watching this video. You are not powerless.
That's right.
You are not a victim. You have been given a tool, a very powerful tool, to speak to those who hold office and who are making these decisions. And that is the vote. Because in this country, power flows from the Almighty to the people, and from the people to the government. Okay? You are not, just being tossed about by all these things. No, you have a voice. You have been given power. You should use it. If you don't use it, then, who can you blame at that point but yourself? You've got to be able to march into that voting booth on Tuesday armed with the confidence to know what has been afforded to you as an American citizen, and informed with the knowledge about the things that you're going to be voting on, and to use that power that has been given to you by God to speak and communicate to the state, to the nation, and to your local governance about how a Christian views all of these issues, and the morality and the integrity that guides you will be communicated into those realms of power. That's how it's supposed to work, and I want you to use that. We want you to use the voice and use the tools that God has put into your lap to influence your community, to influence the state in which we live and the country that we love so much. I want to thank you for watching our video, and we'll catch you another time on the channel.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks.